Day 3 after murdering somebody.
Whoa! Don't put that on camera.
It might seem logical to assume that only adults are capable of committing heinous crimes, but children can be equally susceptible to acts that shock and horrify. From a young murderer taunting a victim's family in court, to a killer couple boasting about their recent crime on YouTube, or even two brothers murdering their family members for internet fame, these young offenders have left an indelible mark. In this video, we'll explore some of the most disturbing cases of young criminals in U.S. prisons, detailing the shocking and tragic crimes that shocked the nation. We've got everything from Savona's most infamous kid to the horrifying case that shocked Jacksonville, so stay tuned. Number 9. Eric Smith, the young killer from Savona. Eric Smith's story became one of the most infamous cases in U.S. history, captivating the nation in 1993. On the morning of August 2nd, a seemingly normal day in Savona, New York, would forever be marred by an unthinkable tragedy. 13-year-old Eric Smith encountered 4-year-old Derek Roby, who was on his way to a local summer camp. Eric, with a sinister motive, convinced Derek to follow him to a nearby wooded area, claiming it was a shortcut. Once they were alone, Eric brutally attacked Derek, first strangling him to unconsciousness, then smashing a rock onto his head, and finally pouring Kool-Aid from Derek's lunchbox into his open wounds. Derek's mother, Doreen Roby, was devastated when her son did not arrive at camp as expected. As the hours passed, a search began, only for Derek's body to be found in the woods later that day, not far from the park. The town of Savona was gripped with fear, unsure of who could have committed such a horrific crime. The shock was compounded when, just a week later, Eric Smith confessed to his mother that he had killed Derek. He was arrested, tried as an adult, and became the youngest person ever to stand trial for murder in New York State at the time, despite no physical abnormalities being found in Eric's brain function or hormone levels. It became clear that his social struggles, including years of bullying and isolation, may have contributed to his violent outburst. In 1994, he was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to the maximum term for juvenile offenders, 9 years to life in prison. Eric Smith spent nearly 30 years behind bars, with his parole repeatedly denied. Despite his lengthy incarceration, Smith participated in rehabilitation programs and repeatedly expressed remorse for his actions. After several parole hearings, Eric Smith was finally granted parole in 2021 and released from prison, though his case continues to be a controversial subject. Number 8. Joshua Phillips, the crime that shocked Jacksonville. Joshua Phillips's case is a grim reminder of how a young life can spiral into tragedy. Convicted of first-degree murder at just 15 years old, Phillips's crime shocked Jacksonville, Florida, in 1998. It began on November 3rd, when 8-year-old Maddie Clifton went missing from her neighborhood. She had been playing outside, but when her mother went to check on her, Maddie was nowhere to be found. Her disappearance set off a massive community search, with volunteers and search parties combing the area for any sign of her. Joshua Phillips, then 14, was even involved in the search efforts, showing no signs of the crime he had already committed. It wasn't until November 10th that Maddie's body was discovered, hidden under Joshua's bed. His mother had noticed a wet spot on the floor of his room, and upon further inspection, found Maddie's body hidden there. The shock was immediate, and Phillips was arrested shortly after. Later, he confessed to the murder, detailing the horrific events that led to the child's death. On that fateful day, Phillips had been playing baseball with Maddie, despite his parents being away. According to Phillips, he accidentally hit Maddie in the eye with the ball, causing a painful injury. Fearing the consequences of his father's strict alcoholic behavior, Phillips panicked and tried to silence Maddie by hitting her with a baseball bat. When that failed to stop her cries, he escalated the violence, stabbing her multiple times with a knife and ultimately killing her. He then attempted to hide the body, even using air fresheners to mask the smell as it began to decompose. Phillips was charged as an adult and sentenced to life without parole, avoiding the death penalty due to his age. This tragic crime, committed by a young boy, left the community in disbelief. Now in his 40s, Joshua Phillips remains incarcerated at the Cross City Correctional Institution, serving out a life sentence for the brutal murder of Maddie Clifton. His case remains a sobering reminder of the darkness that can sometimes take hold of young minds. Number 7. Bever Brothers, the deadliest crime in Broken Arrow. The Bever Brothers case stands as one of the most chilling acts of mass murder in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. On July 22, 2015, Robert, 18, and Michael, 16, executed a violent plan to murder their family members in their home. Their motive was driven by an insatiable desire for fame and notoriety. According to Detective Rihanna Russell, the brothers aimed to kill at least 50 people, desperate for media coverage and a Wikipedia page. They had carefully planned the massacre, amassing a collection of knives for the brutal task. The horrifying night began when Michael lured his sister into a bedroom under the guise of showing her something on the computer. Once inside, Robert ambushed her, slashing her throat and stabbing her multiple times. Their mother, April, was then brutally attacked by Robert, who inflicted at least 48 knife wounds, killing her instantly. The brothers continued their rampage, attacking their father, David, who endured 28 stabbings and blunt force trauma, and their 7-year-old brother, Christopher, who suffered 6 stab wounds. Their 18-year-old sister, Victoria, was next, stabbed 18 times in the neck, chest, and arms. In the midst of the chaos, Daniel, just 12 years old, managed to lock himself in a room and call 911. But Michael tricked him into opening the door, pretending to be a victim. Once inside, the brothers stabbed Daniel 9 times. Despite the brutal attack, Daniel's quick thinking played a crucial role in saving his 2 younger sisters, Autumn, 2, and Crystal, 13. The brothers fled the scene, but police soon tracked them down with the help of a canine unit, locating them in a wooded area nearby. Crystal Bever, a survivor of the attack, identified her brothers as the perpetrators. Robert and Michael were charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of assault with intent to kill. They both pled not guilty, but in 2016 and 2018, they were convicted on all charges. Robert received a life sentence without parole, while Michael, due to his age, was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole, though his release is highly unlikely. Number 6. Heavenly Arroyo, a teenage murderer's cold heart. In a tragic case of teenage violence, Heavenly Arroyo, a 15-year-old girl, ended the life of 68-year-old Ana Vasquez Rodriguez in a brutal and shocking manner. The incident took place on October 6, 2019, at Arroyo's great-uncle's home in Fall River, Massachusetts. The tension in the household had been building for days, and when Arroyo's great-uncle, who was planning a trip to New York, was delayed due to car problems, it pushed Arroyo to a breaking point. Frustrated and agitated, she chose to take out her anger on Ana. Arroyo, who had been living in the house with Ana and her grandson, waited until the house was quiet and then attacked Ana while she lay in bed. Using a knife, she stabbed the elderly woman 70 times. The only other person in the house at the time was Ana's grandson, who was playing video games in another room, unaware of the horrific crime taking place just a few feet away. After the murder, Arroyo calmly took a shower, discarded her blood-stained clothes in a nearby dumpster, and then tried to cover up her crime by claiming that a masked man had entered the house and killed Ana. Her story began to unravel when security footage from the Fall River Housing Authority showed her disposing of the clothes, contradicting her earlier statement. Once arrested, Arroyo's demeanor shifted dramatically. In a court appearance, she shockingly smiled and flipped her hair, showing no remorse for her actions. In 2023, Arroyo, now 18, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in Fall River Superior Court. Judge Renee Dupuis sentenced her to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 19 years. Number 5. Sierra Halseth, a teenager's murderous plot with her boyfriend. In a disturbing case of teenage rebellion and murder, 16-year-old Sierra Halseth and her 18-year-old boyfriend, Aaron Guerrero, executed a gruesome and calculated murder. The victim was Sierra's father, Daniel Halseth, who had been involved in a contentious custody battle with Sierra's mother, Elizabeth Helgelian. Sierra and Aaron's relationship was short-lived but filled with tension, and when their parents found out they planned to run away to Los Angeles, their relationship ended. On April 8, 2021, the young couple purchased a circular saw blades, bleach, lighter fluid, gloves, and a drop cloth, preparing for the murder. The next day, Daniel Halseth's mutilated body was discovered in his garage. The autopsy revealed he had suffered over 70 stab wounds to his head, neck, and torso. In an attempt to hide their crime, the couple stuffed his remains into a sleeping bag and set them on fire, leaving his body unrecognizable. After the murder, Sierra and Aaron recorded a video for YouTube where Aaron announced they were free and enjoying their new life. However, their run from justice was short-lived. Authorities apprehended them in Salt Lake City shortly after the video went public. On May 26, 2022, Sierra and Aaron pled guilty to multiple charges, including murder, arson, and robbery. Both were sentenced to 22 years to life in prison with the possibility of parole. At their sentencing, Sierra did not express any remorse, while Aaron offered an apology. Their shocking crime and complete lack of regret shocked everyone. Time for the fancy topic. In a shocking and unsettling turn of events, a young boy named Jason, aged only 14, has become one of the most feared figures in a high-security adult prison. Known for his cold demeanor and terrifying reputation, Jason's journey to the prison system has left prison staff, law enforcement, and inmates alike shaken to the core. This case is one that no one could have anticipated. How could a child, still in his early teens, instill fear into some of the most hardened criminals in the United States? This is the most feared kid in U.S. prison. Jason's backstory is filled with violence and trauma. Raised in a broken home and surrounded by crime, he quickly developed a dangerous temper. It was in his early teens when he was first arrested for violent crimes, which included assaults and robberies. His notorious actions were enough to lead authorities to classify him as a juvenile delinquent, though it was clear from the start that his issues went much deeper than typical behavioral problems. His violent outbursts seemed almost premeditated, and those who witnessed them claimed they were unlike anything they'd ever seen in a child. As Jason continued to escalate in his crimes, it became apparent that traditional juvenile detention facilities were no longer enough to contain him. At 14, his violent tendencies had reached a point where the authorities decided it was time to place him in an adult facility. No one knew exactly what to expect when he arrived, but what followed has left many questioning the safety of the prison system. From the moment Jason stepped into the high-security prison, it was clear that he was not like the other inmates. Despite his small size and youthful appearance, his presence alone seemed to intimidate even the most hardened criminals. Prison guards reported that he had an unnerving ability to stay calm in situations that would provoke most adults. His cold, calculating gaze was enough to make even the toughest men feel uneasy. Jason's tattoos, which appeared far too soon for a boy his age, only added to the air of menace he exuded. The designs, eerie and symbolic, marked him as someone who had lived a life far beyond his years. His reputation grew quickly, and soon even the most dangerous of adult prisoners feared him. Inmates who were once considered the toughest in the prison found themselves avoiding eye contact with him, and rumors began to spread of his ability to manipulate situations to his advantage. Now, months into his stay at the adult facility, Jason has earned a reputation as the most feared inmate in the prison. There are whispers among the prisoners of violent encounters involving Jason, though the details remain unclear. Even the guards, who are trained to handle dangerous situations, find themselves wary of him. They have stated that while they attempt to maintain control, there is something unnerving about Jason that makes him hard to contain. Many believe his future holds even more danger. How did such a young child become such a terrifying force in an adult prison? What drives Jason, and what is it that makes him so dangerous? These questions continue to loom over his story as authorities try to figure out what the future holds for this frightening young man. Do you think Jason's violent behavior could have been prevented? How do you think the prison system should handle young offenders with extreme tendencies like his? Let us know in the comments with the hashtag #FancyTopic. Number 4. Roxanna Sikorski, a teen's dark plan to kill her family. Roxanna Sikorski, a 15-year-old girl from Plymouth, Michigan, became involved in a twisted plot to murder her family under the influence of her much older boyfriend, Michael Rivera. Roxanna had been adopted from Poland at the age of 4, and her troubled childhood, marked by abuse, led to her diagnosis of reactive attachment disorder, making it difficult for her to connect emotionally with others. This disorder may have made Roxanna more vulnerable to manipulation, especially by an older, persuasive figure like Rivera. In October 2014, when she was just 15, her relationship with 23-year-old Michael Rivera took a dark turn. Rivera manipulated Roxanna into hatching a plan to murder her family, who disapproved of their relationship. He even sent her detailed instructions on how to carry out the crime, specifying vital areas to target. The planning was meticulous, as Rivera clearly exerted control over Roxanna, using her vulnerability to manipulate her into believing that the only way to be together was through violence. One night, Roxanna attacked her younger brother with a fillet knife, aiming for his neck. Thankfully, he survived the attack. His injuries, while serious, were not life-threatening, but the psychological impact on the family was profound. Her sister's screams alerted their parents, and Roxanna fled through a window. She met up with Rivera, and the two of them went into hiding in southwest Detroit, but the police soon tracked them down. The couple was eventually located through a combination of forensic evidence and eyewitness reports. Their capture was a relief to the Sikorski family, but it marked the beginning of a long and difficult legal battle. Roxanna was charged as an adult due to the premeditated nature of the crime. Under Michigan law, individuals who commit serious crimes like murder conspiracies can be tried as adults, regardless of their age. In March 2016, a Detroit court sentenced her to 10 to 20 years in prison for her role in the conspiracy to murder her family. Michael Rivera was sentenced to life in prison in 2015. Rivera's role as a manipulative older figure was seen as a key element in the crime, and his actions were considered to be the driving force behind the plot. Roxanna's parents were devastated by the court's decision, believing she had been coerced into the crime by Rivera. They also expressed concern about the psychological toll that adult prison would take on their fragile daughter. Roxanna's mother, Lorene Sikorski, argued that her daughter needed continued psychological help, not imprisonment. Lorene Sikorski had been a strong advocate for her daughter throughout the trial, highlighting the emotional trauma that had plagued her life since childhood. Despite the horrific nature of the crime, Lorene maintained that Roxanna's troubled past and the abusive relationship with Rivera were key factors in her actions. This case sparked a wider conversation about the mental health needs of adolescents involved in violent crime and the ethics of sentencing minors as adults. The debate centered around whether a young person, especially one with a history of trauma, should be treated the same as an adult in the criminal justice system. Roxanna's story highlights the devastating consequences of manipulation and emotional abuse, and it serves as a stark reminder of how vulnerable young people with psychological disorders can be to predatory influences. Number 3. T.J. Lane, the high school shooter. On February 27, 2012, the small town of Chardon, Ohio, was left in shock and grief after a deadly shooting at Chardon High School. T.J. Lane, a 17-year-old student at Lake Academy Alternative School, walked into the school cafeteria that morning wearing a sweatshirt with the word "Killer" emblazoned on it and armed with a .22 caliber handgun. As students gathered before classes began, Lane opened fire without warning, aiming directly at a table where a group of students sat. The attack killed 3 students, 16-year-olds Daniel Palmatore and Demetrius Hewlin, and 17-year-old Russell King Jr., and left 3 others injured, one of whom was paralyzed for life. Lane had previously attended Chardon High School but had transferred to the alternative school where his motive for the shooting remained unclear. Some reports suggested that he may have felt alienated or bullied. However, it was never definitively established if his actions were purely the result of bullying or if there were other contributing factors, such as mental health issues or a history of personal trauma. Lane had been in therapy for emotional and behavioral problems, but it seemed these interventions were insufficient to prevent the tragedy. Additionally, Lane's troubling behavior was noted by classmates and teachers, who later revealed that he had expressed violent thoughts and fantasies prior to the shooting. A teacher chased Lane out of the school, and he was eventually apprehended about a mile away from the scene, near his car. Investigations revealed that Lane had stolen the gun from his uncle. The gun was a small .22 caliber handgun, often used in smaller-scale shootings, but it proved devastating that day. During his trial, Lane showed a shocking lack of remorse. He appeared in court wearing a t-shirt he had made himself with the word "killer" written on it, and taunted the families of his victims with obscene gestures. His callousness and apparent indifference to the gravity of his actions left many people questioning the depths of his emotional and psychological instability. In March 2013, Lane was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. However, in 2014, Lane made headlines again when he, along with 2 other inmates, escaped from the Allen Correctional Institution in Lima, Ohio. After a tense 6-hour manhunt, he was caught. His escape led to his transfer in 2016 to the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison, due to the high profile of his crimes and the fear that he posed a continued danger. His escape and the media frenzy surrounding it further demonstrated his disregard for authority and the seriousness of his actions. While friends described Lane as a seemingly normal teenager with reports of bullying and a difficult home life, the question remains, can these struggles justify the brutal actions he took that day? While it is clear that Lane's life was marked by difficulties, including challenges at home and in school, his choice to commit such a horrific act raises fundamental questions about accountability, mental health, and the role of upbringing in shaping an individual's future. Lane's story serves as a tragic reminder of the potential consequences of untreated emotional and psychological distress, and the deep scars left behind by violence on the victims, their families, and the broader community. Number 2. Alyssa Bustamante, the Missouri teen thrill killer. Alyssa Bustamante's case is one that sent shockwaves through the country when she was revealed as the so-called Missouri teen thrill killer. A seemingly normal 15-year-old girl from Missouri, Bustamante became infamous for the cold-blooded murder of her 9-year-old neighbor, Elizabeth Alton. On October 21, 2009, Alyssa lured Elizabeth into the woods behind their homes, where she brutally killed her by strangling her, slitting her throat, and stabbing her in a shallow grave that Alyssa had previously dug. Alyssa's online presence painted a disturbing picture. On her MySpace and YouTube profiles, she listed killing people and cutting as her hobbies, which reflected her dark and violent fantasies. In her journal, Alyssa wrote about her growing curiosity about murder, revealing chilling details just hours before the killing. She wrote, "I just killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how to feel ATM. It was amazing. Once you get over the 'oh my god, I can't do this' feeling, it's pretty enjoyable." After Elizabeth was reported missing, the police quickly zeroed in on Alyssa. Upon searching her home, investigators discovered her journal, which contained a detailed confession to the crime. During questioning, Alyssa initially denied any involvement, but when confronted with her diary, she admitted to the murder. Alyssa was tried as an adult, pled guilty to second-degree murder, and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. However, due to an additional conviction for armed criminal action, even if she is paroled in 2024, she will still face an additional 30 years, pushing her earliest possible release to 2054 at the age of 60. Number 1. Lionel Tate, a tragic play. Gone wrong. On July 28, 1999, a tragic incident unfolded in Broward County, Florida, when 12-year-old Lionel Tate killed his 6-year-old cousin, Tiffany Eunuch. The two children were left alone in the home while Tate's mother rested upstairs. Shortly after, Tate called his mother to report that Tiffany wasn't breathing. When authorities investigated, they found that Tiffany had suffered severe injuries, including a fractured skull, broken ribs, and internal hemorrhaging. The injuries suggested an extreme level of force, and Tate's claim that he had been imitating wrestling moves seemed implausible. Tate, who weighed 170 pounds, claimed he was simply trying to mimic wrestling moves he had seen on television with Tiffany, who was just 48 pounds. However, the defense failed to sway the jury, and in 2001, Tate was convicted of first-degree murder. Under Florida law, the felony murder rule applied, which meant that even if Tate had not intended to kill Tiffany, his actions still led to her death. Judge Joel T. Lazarus explained that the severity of the injuries and the act of committing them on a child was enough for a first-degree murder conviction. Tate's case sparked significant controversy, as many believed that a 12-year-old should not face life in prison without parole. In 2004, an appeals court overturned his life sentence due to a failure to assess his mental competency properly. Instead, Tate was offered a plea deal, admitting to second-degree murder in exchange for a reduced sentence of 1 year of house arrest and 10 years of probation. However, his legal troubles continued. In 2005, Tate faced charges of armed robbery, and in 2006, he violated his probation. He was eventually sentenced to 10 years for robbery, and in 2008, he entered a no-contest plea to robbery charges. Tate is currently serving his sentence at the Charlotte Correctional Institution. How should these child killers be dealt with? Let us know in the comments below. See you next time.